Neon Entertainment Spotlight.
Hey everyone, we're being joined here by Ben Rosenfeld for Neon Spotlight. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey Mike.
So I know they just set this up pretty recently. And I know you're a busy guy that you do a bunch of sets per night. So I guess I'll start off with that. I hear you're from Russia. I don't know if you're friends with Trump or Putin or any of these things.
It's the same person, isn't it?
But tell me a little bit about how things kind of came together. How you seem like you have a pretty interesting pathway to becoming a comedian through your college path, and now you're playing at colleges. I don't know. Give me the quick,
sure, yeah,
I guess the cliff notes on that.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes long winding road version. I was born in Russia, and then my family immigrated here when I was probably 4 years old, because they were letting all the Jews out of Russia, because that's the thing that happens over time in history. How's that for a comedy podcast start?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah. So I grew up in Connecticut, and then I went to college at Rutgers. And while I was at Rutgers, my freshman year roommate, who's still one of my best friends to today, he was doing stand-up comedy, and I'd always go around with him and kind of give him little ideas and advice and stuff like that. And then a couple of years after college, I was doing management consulting, and I was on a project in Atlantic City. I was on a project in Philadelphia. My freshman year roommate was living in Atlantic City. So I started checking out shows in Philadelphia for him, so if he was going to come visit. And after a couple of weeks of watching Philadelphia shows, I was like, I could write this stuff. So then I went to the hotel, wrote some jokes, and emailed Jay. I'm like, hey, maybe you could use some of this. And he's like, it's not bad. Why don't you try it? And I was like, yeah, why don't I try it? And I've been doing comedy ever since.
That's cool. I mean, now, did you end up, did you finish your degree, or did you just jump right into comedy?
I finished my undergrad. In college, I double majored in economics and philosophy, so I know how to make money. I just don't see the point.
That's kind of interesting because considering your background, it is that I just asked the last guy I was speaking with about the difference between chasing the dreams and chasing the money, but it sounds like you're more on the first part of that.
Well, I was kind of lucky in that my first job out of college was like a fancy management consulting job where I wasn't making investment banker money or anything, but I was making more money than I could spend without feeling like a bit of a douche about it. So after a couple of years of that, I'm like, there has to be something more to life than just this. And I found comedy.
That's really cool. Now you've contributed to the Neon website. I think there's some
yeah, I've written some guest blog
blogs.
posts. Yeah, hopefully helping that SEO.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where it's kind of one of our roles is to help in on that. Now you've got is it an album, The Russian Optimist?
Yep, I have 2 albums out. The first one is called Neurocomedy, and then my second one that came out was The Russian Optimist, and I'm actually recording my third one in September. Most likely the title's going to be The United States of Russia.
So I guess my opening statement was pretty spot on with where your mindset is right now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the political ongoings make my act even... It's funny because, a few years ago, before the whole Trump and Russia thing, sometimes people, when I'd be talking about my family or just Russian culture in general, people, wouldn't believe me, and they'd think I was making it all up if they didn't know anything. And now they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So when you were talking about kind of the money versus, the comedy, it seems like you do like a ton of shows. Like you're bouncing around. I mean, is there some kind of strategy out there that maybe you've adapted that maybe other comedians who didn't have your background, wouldn't employ the same kind of thing? Is there a reason that you are so active?
I mean, I'm based in New York City, which has the most stand-up comedy out of any city in America. And when I was starting, everyone who I respected and liked, guys like Nate Bargatze, Mark Norman, Joe List, who are all blowing up now, they are all doing 3, 4, 5, 6 shows a night. So I was like, oh, if I want to get to be as good as they are, I got to do that. So that's kind of just been the I guess strategy, especially when you're in New York, where you could run around and do 3, 4, 5, 6 shows in a night. It's just been about getting on stage as much as possible, and then when I'm not on stage, writing and turning over material as much as possible. Like my previous album was 2 years ago. It'll be pretty much 2 years to the day between albums. So while I'm not at Louis C.K. levels of a new hour every year, a new hour every 2 years is halfway there.
Yeah, no. So I would imagine that if you're bouncing around in New York from gig to gig, you've got a pretty strong Uber rating. Is that fair to say?
The New York gigs don't pay as well as the colleges, so I try to take the subways. And Uber's evil, so I'm more of a Lyft guy. But yeah, I use it sometimes.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm kind of new to it. It's new to our city. So going back to the college stuff, like how is the college stuff different than maybe the smaller venues at like in New York, or I don't know how much you travel out west or what have you?
Yeah, I think I'm actually one of the few comedians who really likes colleges, because a lot of people I know who do them, they kind of complain about language restrictions or they're sensitive and stuff like that, whereas I've had the opposite experience, because when you're at a club, they're like drunk and kind of they just want to unplug from the week, whereas the college shows, they're usually smart and sober. So, and my stuff's more on the intellectual side, so I actually really enjoy doing the colleges. And like one example, when I recorded my last album in September 2015, and those 2 shows went great. But then a couple months later, I was at Alfred University, and I did like pretty much the same material, and that went even better. And I was like, man, I should have recorded my album here.
Is that something that you might got to do in the future, like record an album at a college?
It's definitely in my I've definitely thought about it. This third one, it's not going to work out, but I would definitely be open to that in the future.
How was Alfred? I mean, that's not too far from where I am. It's a pretty small town, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tiny college town. I think it took 5 hours to get to, but it was a beautiful drive the whole way. And then it was a nice. They put you in like the nice university hotel, and the show was great. It was like a Saturday night. It was a packed room. That there was some I think a kid of a professor's wanted to do stand up for the first time, so I let him open for me, and he like killed, and he did really well. And he was like 15. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be opening for him in 5 years.
Do you keep in touch?
No, I haven't heard from him actually. I think I emailed the parents the next day, but I haven't heard from him in a while.
Do you have like a certain circle of comics that you kind of set gigs up with, or keep in close proximity to?
I definitely have. Everyone has people they're better friends with, but especially running around New York City, where there's hundreds, if not thousands, of comedians, you try to be as friendly and as cordial with everyone as possible. So you were saying that the colleges are kind of your thing, like you'd rather do those. Like, can you anything stand out as maybe one of your favorite places to perform at? Yeah, no, I definitely I love doing colleges. the more of those, the more fun it is. Because the other thing is, like, in New York City, you're doing like 10, 15 minutes at a time because there's a lot more comedians on the show. Whereas when it's a college, it's just you and maybe I bring an opener doing like 10 minutes, but I get to do an hour. So it's just like the crowd gets to know you much better. Whereas when you're doing just 10 minutes, you kind of either skip around material or just do this chunk and not everything. Whereas like when you're up there for an hour, they kind of really get to know your personality.
So like the longer ones are a lot cooler to you then. And then obviously you can't bounce around, as much as you do in New York when you're doing the colleges because it's not so.
Right. Yeah. When it's a college, it's one a day. I mean, occasionally you can have like a noon show and then a second show at night, but it's usually one a day. But that's fine because you're for an hour you're kind of thinking about it more, how to structure it, and then you're driving to get. I mean that's the main difference, right? In New York, you're running from place to place, whereas a college usually you have to travel from where you live to get there, so that takes part of the day.
Right. No, that makes sense. What areas do you normally cover when you're doing the colleges? Is it all over the country, or do you just kind of stick to a certain area?
I'm open to wherever. Most of the gigs I've played have been either the Northeast or Florida, and also California, so kind of the coasts, I guess. But I'm open to wherever. Wherever people are smart and sober, I'm happy to perform.
Smart and sober. That's great. Have you gotten much into, like, I saw that there's some, some hosting stuff on your resume here and things like that. Is that something that you're, interested in doing more, or are you just more interested in just the performance side of it, like live performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say hosting is a type of performance. And, yeah, I've hosted podcasts and web series, and I actually have some TV episodes coming out of Mysteries at the Museum where I'm like the talking head, kind of talking the story through. So I enjoy it. I'm open to whatever gets me more exposure, so then when I do stand-up, people come out because it's me.
Well, I mean, where do you, is this kind of a labor of love, or is, do you have kind of like an end game in mind? What are your kind of, what are you thinking about where you want to take? It's definitely
a labor of love and profit. It's definitely a labor of love and profit, I would say. You don't want to just do it for love. I mean, you want to have the love to begin with, but, you don't want to end up in a homeless shelter because you love it so much.
Do you often, because of your background, do you often have comics that kind of lean on you to ask you how, they should kind of look to how they should book themselves or anything like that, or is that just nothing that really comes up in normal conversation?
Yeah, I mean, newer comics. Yeah, I'd say newer comics sometimes asking for career advice and things like that, and then other comedians, because I used to work in technology, so other comedians tend to ask me for tech support because not everyone's very tech savvy. So I definitely try to help people out. Career-wise, I'd say the goal is playing theaters where they come because it's me. The way to get to that is usually through either a TV show or a popular podcast or a big YouTube following, or just finding a way to find your audience.
What's the coolest podcast that you've been involved in so far? For 2 years, I hosted a podcast called the Passive Aggressive Podcast. It was me, this guy, Bobby Haha, who's a very colorful character, and Mike Vecchione, who's one of the best comedians in New York City. It was the three of us, where Mike and I are both like more writer types, and Bobby's one of those guys that doesn't stop talking. So it's an interesting mix of the three of us. And he's like an ex-military, ex-mob kind of guy. He's ex-straight, so he's like very colorful. I kind of get the feeling that you tend to keep things a little on the cleaner side when it comes to language.
Yeah, I'm on the cleaner side, but Bobby was definitely telling more R and X-rated stories on that podcast, but I learned a lot about the gay lifestyle that I would not have otherwise known.
Well, I mean, it's always good to broaden your horizons at some point, so I think that's probably the safer way to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this was really cool. Like, Ben, I really appreciate you taking the time to have a little conversation with us here.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody who is listening, how can they find more of your information, and how can they find some of your material?
Mm-hmm. Anyone can find me on bigbencomedy.com as well as neon-entertainment.com, and all social media. It's Big Ben Comedy. And that has, if you just go to my website, that has all my stand-up clips, little sketches I've made, any sorts of, a book I have out, any sorts of stuff that I'm involved in. My website is the repository for it.
Cool. Hey, the last thing I want to ask you about is the nursery rhyme book.
Mm-hmm. So a few years back, I was visiting my dad, and I was like a little down or depressed, and he started reading Russian nursery rhymes to me, which are these little 2 or 4 line poems that are like dark and depressing, but they're so dark that they make you laugh because they're kind of insane. So one, it cheered me up right away, and then I was like, I should do this in my stand-up act, because some of my humor while I'm clean, it's on the darker side, I would say. Not all of it, but some of it. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I can explain why I'm like this by sharing Russian nursery rhymes. And it's stuff like «Маленький мальчик нашел пулемет, больше в лесу ничто не живет», which translates to «A little boy found a machine gun, nothing lives in the woods anymore».
Okay.
So, yeah, they're right. It's the what the hell, and then you can't help but laugh because they're nuts. So I started doing like 3 or 4 of them on stage, like explaining like, look, it's not my fault I'm like this. I'm going to share some Russian nursery rhymes with you, then you'll understand. And then that bit would do really well. So after a while, I was like, this should be a book. So I went ahead and I did a Kickstarter for it, and I got an illustrator, and I turned it into a illustrated coffee table book of 30 dark nursery rhymes with full illustrations on them. And the Kickstarter did well, and then it's been doing great on Amazon. It's been top 20 for dark humor, the print version, and the Kindle version's been top 5 in humor. And it's called Russian Optimism, Dark Nursery Rhymes to Cheer You Right Up. And you can go to RussianOptimism.com to find it, or just type in Russian Optimism on Amazon.
It's really cool. It kind of reminds me of when in the early 2000s I was into Death Cab for Cutie, and I had moved back in with my parents for a short period of time, and my mother was listening to some of the songs that I had was playing, and
right.
She said, these songs sound really nice, but they're very dark and depressing. I was like, that's just music in the early 2000s.
Right. Yeah, the post.
So maybe you can hook up with Benjamin Gibbert and you can write some lyrics for him.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because comedy's become a job now. I've kind of started writing and recording little rap lyrics as my hobby, just to have something fun to do without any career goals.
I mean, you have to have some kind of an outlet, something you enjoy. Yeah. That's a little bit adjacent to your work.
Yeah, I mean, when I write the rhymes, they're more funny than anything else, but it's a fun little thing to get a little creative steam off.
Right, absolutely. Well, hey, I really, once again, I really appreciate your time, Ben. Neon Entertainment Spotlight.